Hello and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise podcast. I'm really pleased today to be joined by Jennie Jacques. Jennie is an English actress living with ME. She played Queen Judith in Vikings, which is available on Amazon Prime, and starred in London Kills, available on BBC iPlayer in the UK, as well as WPC 56 and a number of other feature films and TV series. Jennie runs the Bake for ME CFS initiative to raise money for ME research organisations. So thank you so much for joining us, Jennie.
Thank you for having me.
I thought I'd just share with you my experience of watching Vikings because I basically binge watched Vikings when I first became ill with ME.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, so it was one of those things that sort of like, so it was sort of 2018, so it was like the early series, and I kind of was ill. I wasn't able to work. My life was basically falling apart because you kind of just it's the and like I was saying to you before we started recording, I was ill with ME when I was younger, so it was the knowledge that this is what my life might become, kind of like from now on, because I knew ME, I knew kind of how it was and how it was going to impact me. So yeah, I kind of like, it was pure escapism for me, kind of like watching Vikings at that time. So like my kind of memories of watching Vikings is kind of like linked with kind of becoming ill, but it was escapism. Yeah, but not like, my memories of watching it isn't in a bad way, but it was kind of like, it was escapism for me, because I think you need some escapism, don't you, when you're really ill and kind of thinking about the sudden kind of onslaught of what life might become for you. So yeah, and Vikings is pretty kind of, it's pretty gory in places and it's pretty heavy in places, but it kind of like, it was something for me that it took me away from the reality of my situation. So yeah, thank you for sort of being a part of that. So yeah.
Do you know what? I've never thought of it like that for someone
Yeah,
else. So
yeah, it's
that's made me really
interesting.
happy.
Yeah,
Anything to escape some of these symptoms that we unfortunately have to endure.
yeah. So yeah, thank you for coming on, because like when I was sort of saying, when I was Dov and I were sort of setting up this podcast and thinking about something we could do, a podcast about ME, we were thinking a lot about talking to people that kind of work creatively with their ME or have worked creatively. And you were sort of like on my list, and I thought, oh no, she won't want to come on our podcast, but it's so good to have you, and I'm really
No,
pleased you're here. So
absolutely. I want to come on your podcast. I did my research, and I'm honoured to be on it. So thanks.
oh, that's nice, thank you.
And I am fussy, actually.
Good.
Very fussy as to who I will do an interview with. I haven't done many interviews, largely because I haven't been well enough, but also because, as I sort of said to you before, despite being in the public eye, I'm relatively private. And of course, talking about your medical health or, situation is probably as personal as it can get. So it's not necessarily something that prior to illness I would have ever imagined myself being comfortable with. However, having gone through what I've gone through, being in year 5 with MECFS, and gratefully at the milder end of the spectrum. However, even the milder end is can be excruciatingly painful and limiting in terms of what I can do physically and occasionally mentally, cognitively. But it's a privilege, and I don't say that lightly, to be able to represent the ME community. And I'm nervous because I want to do a good job, and that's what
Yeah.
I said to you before. I do put pressure on myself because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I am so determined to drive the narrative in the right direction.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? And there is so much, like you say, misinformation. And I think that it kind of comes through like national media, even government and stuff. I think there's levels where that people misunderstand what ME is, and part of the reason why we called our podcast Post-Exertional Mayonnaise was just daft and just silly, but it was partly because that is the signal. Well, post-exertional malaise. I always get it mixed up now. It's a really bad idea. But
No, it's
but
not. I love it. That's partly why I took the interview. I love
it's just
silly
daft.
and daft and
Yeah.
humour, because what we're talking about is actually so dark. That's all
Mm,
we've got, and
mm,
creativity. So
mm.
post-exertional mayonnaise. I just, I was like, right, yeah, I'll do that. I'll have an interview with them.
Yeah, it is just silly, but it's I think because PEM or PEM or whatever you want to call it, there's lots of other names, isn't there? But it's the signifier sort of issue, and it's what makes ME so debilitating, and that's the biggest challenge, and I think that's the thing that's most misunderstood, isn't it? In terms of people talking about fatigue, it's not just fatigue; it's the impact of doing things that then impacts you severely afterwards, and yeah, it's all about managing that. So, do you want to tell us a bit about sort of how you first became ill, and were you kind of working on an acting project at the time, and what that process entailed in terms of kind of like diagnosis and disentangling yourself from kind of like work and things?
Absolutely. Prior to the interview, because I wanted to talk openly and candidly about my own experience, but also get the facts straight, I actually looked back at my medical notes.
Mm, right.
That was daunting. And I sort of revisited year 1 and 2 of this illness, which for me personally were the worst. I get emotional. I had a taste of severe ME. Um, sorry,
It's all right.
I had a taste of it, and it was a small taste, and that involved me being in a dark room, the shutters closed, unable largely to communicate. I needed help washing. I had and have an extraordinarily supportive partner who's actually a serious injury lawyer.
Wow.
So he really understood chronic fatigue. He deals with brain
Mm,
injury, so he really understood it. Um, and just looking back at my medical notes and the journey I went on during those 2 years, I will share with you, but that was hard because
mm,
you sort of forget. I pushed it to the back of my mind. I think because I'm in the extremely lucky percentage of people to see the improvement I've seen in year 5, despite my life still being limited. I'm still a shadow of my former self, especially physically.
mm.
Um, but because I am in that tiny percentage that have got better, part of me, I think, shoves the trauma of those
Yeah,
first
yeah.
2 years away. I locked it away. But I thought I can't do this interview and not talk about it. So yeah, I
Mm,
got my medical notes out. But I think before I go into my own history with the illness, just because it's likely I'll have, some of my fan base watching that might not even know what MECFS
mm,
is, I was going to try my best to explain what ME is, what I've got, what I'm in my 5th year of, so to speak.
mm.
Um, I'm going to go a bit scientific. I had to Google every other word when I used to myself delve into the science of ME. But I will explain in layman's terms what each word means, and I don't mean to patronize anyone. This is just something that I had to do for myself, so I think it's only fair
No, and
to
it's
do
good
it
because
for
we've not
anybody
really
listening.
we've not really kind of gone into that on the podcast in terms of the nuts and bolts of it. So yeah, it might be helpful.
Mm. Oh, I've got that sticker annoys me. I want to pick it off. This is my mug. Talk about those later.
That's very good.
That's why this is why we're having the interview, because I just loved the humorous side of
Yeah.
your post-exertional mayonnaise. So, MECFS, what is it? Um, I don't like to use the word mysterious illness because to me it's not mysterious.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my interpretation of the word mysterious, each to their own. But it's a long-term illness. It's a neuroimmunometabolic disease. So neurological, immunological, and metabolic. So neurological is the nervous system and how your brain transmits signals for you to do things. And this is all, I'm trying to make this concise. Immunological, obviously, that's more people will understand. That's your immune system. And metabolic. which is the one I had to get my head around a bit more. That's a whole range of biochemical processes that occur within us or any living creature organism. And this disease, therefore, as complex as it is not mysterious. And the reason I stress that is because I'm very well read on the science, as many doctors and specialists are not, and they should be, especially off the back of the fact we've been through a pandemic and we now have however many people with long COVID. There is enough evidence of pathophysiology across multiple organ systems to show that we're not functioning properly. Okay? So I'm trying to spell this out only because when I looked back at my medical notes and saw the treatment I was offered, which was at the time, it's supposedly not anymore, was CBT and graded exercise therapy. No, you can't talk your way out of this illness. You can't talk your way out of this disease. And you can't change your mindset to cure yourself. So I thought if I just speak a few facts and try to explain and break down what ME/CFS is, it might help people to understand why later on I will perhaps mock how I was treated when I look back at my medical history. And I think, if I was going to say in layman's terms or explain to a friend or family member, how I explain it myself is now, yes, I'm at the milder end, but I'm like a broken iPhone. My battery doesn't work. I don't recharge properly. Sometimes on some days, the symptoms can be so severe that all I can do is lie there. And although there's little rhyme or reason to the illness, one thing that we can all relate to if you have ME is PEM, post-exertional malaise, post-exertional mayonnaise, as you have called it. And that is, if we overexert, there can be serious repercussions. And again, I'm going to go back to getting CBT. Giving someone a gentle graded exercise program is like a doctor telling a patient with a broken leg to hop on it of a morning. That doesn't mean you can't move within your energy envelope, depending how much battery you've got. But yeah, I think we need to talk facts and we need to talk science because there's too much misinformation out there, and there is enough in 2023. No, there's not enough. There's not enough, full stop. But there's enough to prove that this illness is very real, very serious, and my goodness me, if you're at the severe end of it, moderate or mild, your quality of life is affected, terribly so. I'm sat here doing an interview with you, and I know I only have so long that I'll be able to sit up and keep talking to you, and I've prepared for me to lie down as and when I need to. Who knows? I might get to the end of the interview, but this is at the mild end of ME. Working out how long I can sit up for.
And they call
It's
it mild.
ridiculous.
Yeah. They call it mild, but like I would say I'm moderate, dipping sometimes into severe, but even moderate, I'm not able to work. And these times when I do the podcast, it's like it's those sort of rare bits of time that I've got a bit of energy. And like even today, like I've got brain fog. I'm not crashy, but I've got brain fog. But then after we've finished, I'll go and lie down, and I'll probably be in bed for the rest of the day until I need to make some tea. So that's my life, and we call that sort of moderate. And I think even the scales feel really wrong because people with mild ME who maybe are able to work part time and things like that, they think actually it's mild. It's not. It's severely impacts on people's lives. It's yeah.
And maybe I'm a very optimistic person, and the truth is, I do go from mild to moderate. I like to focus on the mild, toxic positivity, but I'm extraordinarily limited as well, and I do understand. Just from what you've just said, oh, I've got my watch. This helps. I use this to pace, so it lets me know if I'm overdoing it. I mean, that one said you need to move more, but I'm not doing that. But yeah, pacing has been at the center of the illness because, if this was broken, this phone here, my analogies, my partner says my analogies, so Jenny, no one will understand them. So excuse me, they will, I'll explain. But just as an example, if I was this broken iPhone, it can only be used so much for so many hours as it conks out.
Mm-hmm.
And then recharging it is a problem. I was just thinking we could get a deal with Apple now. Just Jennie Jacques talks about the broken iPhone and the terrible battery power. But yeah, that's, I suppose, how I try to describe it.
Mm.
I get glitches sometimes. Sometimes messages might work, other times phone calls just won't. And it's really difficult to navigate. A lot of the time, I feel like I'm on a tightrope, to be quite honest with you. But I'm really grateful to be on this end of the tightrope because I've been on
Mm.
the other end of the tightrope, and as horrible as it is to be here in this position, it's better than where I was. So I'm
Mm.
holding on to that.
Mm.
But hopefully, I've explained well enough what ME/CFS is: myalgic encephalomyelitis, love a tongue twister.
Mm-hmm.
And the CFS bit stands for chronic fatigue syndrome, which I find a really disparaging name. I think
Yeah.
that doesn't quite reflect the seriousness of the illness that we're talking about. And I always say to people, look, Google severe ME to get an understanding
Yeah.
of how impacted a person's life is.
Mm.
However, as I mentioned before, my partner, who is serious injury lawyer, he did reassure me and say, look, in my industry, as an example, chronic fatigue is taken extremely seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, and in as from his experience medically, chronic fatigue and the association with brain injury, and he thinks ME is to do with the brain. I
Mm.
mean, myalgic encephalomyelitis stands for inflammation of the brain.
Mm.
That's what it was originally called before psychologists stepped in. um,
Yeah.
So yeah, he reassured me of that because I told him that I didn't like the name. But once I knew that, I thought, oh, actually, I suppose it's all right. But I still prefer Emmy.
Mm. Definitely.
And I think I just wanted to, before I went into my own personal history, medical history, and how I got here, I just wanted to sort of try and explain what this illness is.
Mm. Mm.
And it is difficult because it is complex and it's hard to explain,
Yeah.
especially when you've got brain fog.
Mm.
But
And I think that's my problem with the science of it. I'll be looking on Twitter and there'll be new research that comes out, and it almost feels like for some of it you need a medical degree to even like understand some of it to start off with. So, and my brain just doesn't process a lot of that stuff now. So yeah, thank you for being interested in the science and sort of like
honestly, it's the
putting
only
it across.
thing that got me through. And also, I was extremely grateful for the fact that on my worst days, obviously, I couldn't read the science, but on my better days, when I was laying in bed, that's all I did. So I'll back up anything that I speak about, anything that I say, and if a specialist or a doctor or even a scientist wants to have a chat with me, they need to be careful because I'm extremely well read on it. And I'm blowing my own trumpet there, but I am.
No, that's good. And I think ME patients all need a Jennie Jacques, don't need to come with us to appointments and things
Oh,
like that. Just to
they're all going to get one if I continue getting better. The world better watch out.
yeah.
I'll tell you that much. When I went through my old medical notes, I also went through my old notes on the science that I was reading at the time. Now, what disappoints me slightly is, as much as I love the small group of scientists pioneering in this area of research, and I really do, in particular, I champion polybio research. If anybody does want to go and look at the science, I find their website fantastic. And I've reached out to the scientists who work there, microbiologist Amy Prowl, neuroscientist Mike Van Alzecker. I've got his name right. Sorry, Mike. And I do think that they've got someone on their team that I haven't spoken to directly who's working on the metabolic side of the disease. But yeah, when I was looking through my old medical notes, I found my science notes too, and I even shocked myself. I thought, oh God, oh right, yes. So I was just, that's all I did. I mean, I suppose I was just trying to hold on to some hope and just get some sort of I think I was preparing myself for arguments too, because I knew there was a stigma attached to the
Yeah.
illness.
And you
So I
don't know.
wanted to make sure that I was well equipped.
Yeah.
If anything was said to me, even at my worst, when I could barely sit up in a chair, I
Mm.
wanted to make sure I could articulate myself. I used to record it on my iPhone sometimes and listen to it so that I
Mm.
could get the words right. And one person, I became obsessed with scientists, Dr. Sistrom. Have you heard of him?
No, like I say, I kind of don't dive too much into the science because my brain just doesn't, compute.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but it's
Am I
good.
allowed?
Yes, no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, go for it because it
Okay,
really
cool.
helps, and I'm learning
you'll
something
be
as well.
you'll
So,
be bamboozled by the end of it, like. But yeah, so I remember at one point earlier on in the illness when I was just trying to find any sort of medication that could potentially help me. I appreciated that there wasn't a lot out there, but there was some stuff out there. And I found some notes. I've got them here in my old medical records. And I sat in front of a cardiologist, a private one. I paid for a private one because I didn't want to wait. And again, I was in a really fortunate position where I could pay for a private one. I mean, I think that makes a massive difference in the
yeah,
illness. What's your
yeah,
financial position when all of a sudden you can do nothing?
yeah,
So I found these notes, and I remember I tried to regurgitate this. I said, that there's new evidence of cardiopulmonary nervous system abnormalities in people with ME/CFS, and there are these results from invasive cardiopulmonary testing. And I was Googling every other word to tell him. And I said, and Dr. Sistrom at the Boston University, he said that pyridostigmine might help. So I was trying to get on pyridostigmine. Have you heard of that med? Right, and it did kind of help. I know it helps some people. It's not a cure. I'm not one to sit and talk about cures, but I remember learning all this, and I had to Google ventricular filling and oxygen extraction from the muscle.
wow,
But the reason I'm talking about this now is because
mm.
this is proven.
Mm.
Okay, this was 5 years ago. It's proven that we're not functioning properly. I did get on the medicine that I wanted to get on, and ironically, the cardiologist that I sat opposite knew the doctor, Dr. Sistrom, who'd done all these tests.
Wow,
So I did, but what I had to do to get there, especially whilst I was unwell, is ridiculous. And as you
mm.
said, many ME patients need a Jennie Jacques to, come along to the interview and say blah, 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 but it shouldn't be like that. The
No,
doctors should be up to date
yeah,
on the science.
yeah, yeah,
And I appreciate that some meds perhaps are not, is it FDA approved, and some meds, you've got to work out, is it risk versus benefits? But it's a hell of a lot better than giving someone CBT and
yeah,
exercise.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's just ridiculous.
yeah.
But the reason I came across this was because I looked back at my medical notes. And in answer to your question, we've got a very long way, long way about it. I became sick 5 years ago.
Mm.
I was on an acting job. I don't know if I'm allowed to say what project I was on. I don't know if I've got some sort of contract that I've signed without knowing. So I'll keep my mouth shut.
Mm.
It was a big job.
Mm.
It was just after London Kills, and I'd started it. Now, bear in mind, I've not missed one day of work.
Mm.
I missed one rehearsal once on one job because I had a stomach bug. That's it. That's it in my whole career. So for me to get ill on a job and not return to it is a big deal. I got sick towards the end of 2018. It started as I thought stomach bug. My stomach was playing up a lot, gastro, which I know affects a lot of ME patients. And then I sort of got a sore throat, flu-like symptoms, and I felt really run down. And I thought, oh, okay. I was in the hiatus of filming, so that's like the little holiday that we get. It was the Christmas hiatus, and I'd actually booked to go to New York with my partner, and I just didn't feel right. I just felt really unwell. And prior to that, I'd had chronic infections, water infections, UTIs. So I was a bit run down, and I'd just bought my first flat independently. So that was a big deal. And maybe there was stress on my body. It was like the perfect storm to just not be very well.
Mm.
And I took it with a pinch of salt, to be honest, looking back. But prior to going back into filming after the hiatus, I thought, you know what, I'm going to book a private doctor's appointment just to check there's nothing serious, because I really do feel pretty sick. And then I'll go back on set. So I booked one, and some blood results came back that said that my liver enzymes weren't right. And I said, well, what do you mean by not right? And the doctor said, well, it's what I'd expect from an overweight middle-aged man who drinks a lot. Thought,
Wow.
cheeky bastard. I said, well, that's not me. He said, well, yeah, that's, they're not quite right. So we want you to come back and get them measured again. I thought, I'm just going to go back to work, and I'll let them know that my liver enzymes aren't right. I mean, looking back, now I'd take it more seriously. At the time, I was just wanting to get back to work and pretend I wasn't sick. As you do, everyone does that, don't they? We live in a society where you're told to power through it, and it's wrong. You need to rest if you're sick. Anyway, it wasn't long after that I was hospitalised with severe viral hepatitis, eventually diagnosed with severe acute Epstein-Barr virus, commonly known as glandular fever, which I know is a typical culprit to leading to ME/CFS, something that maybe I should have mentioned earlier. One thing that we do know tends to trigger or initiate this chronic illness is viral or bacterial infection. Not always, but a lot of the time. Hence why, off the back of COVID-19, there's a lot of long COVID patients, people that cannot get over the viral infection. So glandular fever is known to do that. But when I was hospitalised with the acute glandular fever, it took a while to get those results back to say I had EBV. I think I just must have had a nasty strain of it or something, because a CT scan showed my lymph nodes were swollen around my heart and my throat, which led to an emergency neck biopsy. And this is during the acute phase of the virus. Luckily, we did rule out lymphoma, but again, not quickly. When the results came back, they wanted to do another, and I thankfully my infectious diseases doctor stepped in and said, no, leave her alone. She needs to. She's okay. She needs to rest. We'll address it if the lymph node continues to swell. At the same time, this is where my immune system took quite a hit. I had a kidney stone, UTIs, water infections, and eventually sort of like chronic rhinitis that never really went away. Like I couldn't breathe. So I fully appreciated that I'd had this nasty thing happen, and I was hospitalised not once but twice, and that it might take a while to get over. And I was told it might even take a few months, and that I could not go back to work. I could not go back to the acting job. And I couldn't believe that an illness would exist and would happen to me where I'd need a few months off. So I thought, I'll just give it a few weeks or a few days. Fool.
Yeah.
So a few months went by, and I was kept under infectious diseases. And I think this is where my particular case is quite unique, but it worked in my favour. I couldn't clear the viral load from my blood. Now, the first place a virus is going to clear is the plasma, because it's too obvious for it to hide there. And don't get me wrong, it can hide in other places that doctors can't seem to quite test at the moment, sort of your tissues. Just because a virus doesn't show up in your blood doesn't mean that it's not still doing its business. Yeah. But fortunately and unfortunately for me, my virus decided to stay in my blood, and not just for a little while, it was for the entire year. And the infectious diseases doctor that I had said, I've never come across this. Never come across it. And I was diagnosed with EBV viremia. So that basically just means virus in your blood. And therefore, I had to continue to be taken seriously as I was deteriorating and my health was sort of still going up and down, because the virus was still evident in my blood. But she pre-warned me of ME/CFS, and she pre-warned me that even when this clears, you might not be better. And I just remember thinking, chronic fatigue syndrome, not me.
Yeah.
I'm hyperactive. I don't stop. I don't get fatigued. I felt fatigued. And I felt really unwell. But I looked at the name at the time and just thought, you're all right. How wrong I was. And I think this is where I'm probably going to get a bit naughty. Am I allowed to get naughty?
Yeah, say
Jennie
what you
Jacques
want.
gets naughty. Do what you want. Don't say that. Need a leash. I was referred to what's called a chronic fatigue clinic. Okay.
Yeah.
Virus is still in my blood. Very unusual. But my infectious diseases doctor, bless her heart, she was lovely. And I know that not everyone is as, I say lucky, but I mean, it's quite unfortunate what happened. But not everyone is as lucky as to still have the virus in their blood to prove that they're ill, because that's the thing with ME, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
well, what are your laboratory tests saying?
Yeah.
How do we know you're really sick? Because I am. But yeah, I still had the virus in my blood, so I had to be taken seriously. And on top of that, my infectious diseases doctor and her team were really clued up on chronic fatigue syndrome, more than me. I was the one that rolled my eyes at it and was like, not me, until obviously it was started taking its toll. And she said, I am really, really sorry. I'm going to keep you under me because you've got the virus in your blood, but we have to refer you to what's called a chronic fatigue clinic.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, I thought, oh, okay, great. They specialize in this chronic fatigue thing, so I'll get help. And because I'd done my reading on the science, I was expecting to talk to a virologist,
Yeah.
maybe someone who was an expert in microbiology. And I was just like, this is going to be really good. And I kid you not, I'm going to mock this. I was sent to a clinic, which was a really big deal for me to get there, by the way, because I was really, really sick. I was still really, really sick. This is 6 months on. And I was sat in front of a psychiatrist. And I thought, oh, I wonder why I have to have
What's
this
this about?
conversation with a psychiatrist. I didn't know. So I said, what are you again? And he was like, oh, I'm a psychiatrist. And he was a lovely man. He was really nice, actually. I was like, all right. And I was like necking Red Bull. I know I probably shouldn't have been, but I did not know what to do to make Red Bull sponsor. But I didn't know what to do to get me through the interview. And I knew that caffeine sort of woke me up a bit. So it kind of relaxed me, actually, rather than woke me up. I don't know why. So I was necking the Red Bull and I was sat in the chair and I remember slouching because I thought, I don't know if I can sit up for all this interview thing that he was doing with me. And it was like 2 hours. And he started asking me questions like, what was your childhood like?
Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm one of 7 kids and, I was having a chat with him. And I answered all his questions because I wanted to be polite. But it got to a point where I actually couldn't withhold what I was thinking. I said, have you read my medical notes? Am I in the right room? Am I in the right place? Am I with the right doctor? And he was like, I said, well, have you read them properly? He hadn't, because often they don't. I said, I've got a virus in my blood that I can't clear. I thought I was going to talk to, an immunologist or just someone that would actually help me. I don't know why I'm speaking to a psychiatrist. He said, we just have to rule out a few things like depression. And I said, well, I am a bit depressed because I've just lost my job. I'm 6 months into an illness that has completely floored me that I don't quite understand. So yeah, I'm a bit depressed and pissed off, actually. But I couldn't fathom why we were chatting. And honestly, during the interview, he apologized to me and he said, I'm really, really, really sorry. In his own medical language. He said, this is just what we have to do. And he knew that it wasn't really going to help. And I was sent home. This is where I'm going to have a laugh. So I've got a virus in my blood and I'm really ill. I kept them because I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I was sent home with leaflets.
Yeah.
A guided self-help for persistent physical symptoms, a CBT approach.
Yeah.
And graded exercise therapy. You can see it made a good coffee mug stand. Now, at the time, despite being well read and knowing that, reading that exercise can make people worse, that exertion can really affect someone with ME, at the time, because I was so early on in the illness, obviously I was skeptical of both my view and his and thought, well, I'm going to give it a go. And honestly, I mean, I don't know, but I think I wish I hadn't. I really wish I hadn't.
Mm,
I didn't give it a go in terms of going back and forward to the clinic because that was implausible. I gave it a
mm,
go at home, and it made me worse. So if there's anything that someone can take from this video, I have to say, don't I? I am not a doctor. I am not a
mm,
whatever. But rest, listen
mm,
to your body, and figure out your energy envelope, and don't be doing any graded exercise program.
mm.
Move within your energy envelope if you can. But I mean, that is atrocious. It's not. It's now taken off the. Is it Nice or Nice? How do you pronounce
Nice,
it?
yeah, nice guidelines, yeah.
Not very nice. Anyway, it's taken off, isn't it now?
Yeah,
Supposedly.
yeah.
I mean, you can
No,
see even on the back of it, I'm writing 1 minute standing up, heart rate 156. And I know that my heart was going up to 170 just standing because I've got it
mm,
here. How can you make someone exercise? And they're like, oh, maybe that's deconditioning. Well, no, it's not, and it's
it's
proven that it's not. Dr.
crazy.
Sistrom has proven that it's almost
Mm,
actually in a sense the opposite of deconditioning when you look at it in depth,
mm,
science. Not that deconditioning doesn't play its part, of course it does. But this is something very, very different. And yeah, I've got heart things here that show. I had to write. I had to write down. This wasn't part of the what I was prescribed at the clinic. This was with my cardiologist. But here managing activity. So standing up, feeling tired. I hate the word tired, but that's how I
yeah.
felt. You can see, look, 169. It's just stood up. And my
Mm,
resting heart rate was 58, which apparently is still in athletics. So
mm,
yeah, it's just honestly looking back, stressed me out.
mm, yeah. It's
But
int-
also made me very grateful to be where I am today because I know
yeah,
that a lot of people they don't get what I've had, and also I hear a story like yours, and it sounds like you sort of got better and then
yeah.
unfortunately went backwards. So it's a tightrope, isn't it?
I think for me it was I was kind of like I hate saying the word lucky, but like um I when I was finally diagnosed, sort of 4 or 5 months after I became ill, back sort of probably about 6 8 months before you, um, I was offered a fatigue clinic, and I just turned it down because I knew what that meant,
Right.
and because it was like getting back on a bicycle, and I knew like for me when I was like 11, 12, I was like in an inpatient unit in a hospital in a pediatric unit, being forced to be on lifting medicine balls and on bicycle exercise bikes, sort of like by a psychiatrist. And that was in the 90s. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like I knew what that meant, and so I just sort of turned down any sort of referral. But what what really shocked me in the scale of things was that like I'd been away from the ME world for like 20 years, and like nothing had changed. And if in some ways things had actually got worse in terms of pushing that exercise or pushing the thinking your way out of it and stuff. So yeah, it's so like for me it was yeah, I sort of felt like as soon as that sort of fatigue clinic was mentioned, I knew what they had to offer, and they didn't have anything to offer me. So I kind of just
Yeah.
politely turned the referral down. But like for so many people like yourself, like you like you say, you've not heard of ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. It was like it was new. It's like okay, well I'll give it a go because this is what the doctors are telling us. This is what kind of like they know what they're talking about, or they should do, or
Oh,
kind of
absolutely. And especially like because my infectious diseases doctor seemed clued up in understanding, I think, the seriousness of my
mm,
illness. And she could only apologetically send me to a chronic fatigue clinic. I thought, well, maybe I'll get something from it. Maybe there'll be something there, but nothing.
mm,
Absolutely nothing. And if anything, I would strongly argue it made me worse. And no, I didn't go and do what you were forced to do
mm,
because I wasn't well enough to get to and from the clinic. But
mm,
at 11 years old, you can't. There's only so much control you're going to have as
mm,
to what you can and can't say.
mm. Yeah.
And how were they with your? That's really interesting. How were they with your parents on that? Because I've read stories where, if a parent says, "No, no, my child is too unwell," and
Yeah.
cannot get. Then they say, "Oh, well, are you perpetuating this? Are you?"
Yeah, no, and that was a big worry. I was probably in hospital for like a week, under this psychiatrist, and my parents just sort of like discharged me. They kind of like just signed me out, and we went home. And it was like, thinking about it now, because I was aware of so many other cases where there was fabricated illness, or my specialist pediatrician, who was an ME specialist, one of the first in the country. He's dealt with, he over the years he's dealt with so many cases where social care's got involved, or there's been what they called Munchausen's by proxy back then,
Yeah.
fabricated illness, and he sort of stood to support families where that's been an issue, and it's scary. And like I was like, I knew of other young people at the time that I was involved in young people's charities with Emmy, and you heard of cases of young people sort of being taken off the parents and stuff. So it was like, being young at the time, it was a sort of scary kind of like period of my life, thinking that as some men in white coats going to turn up, and you sort of hear these stories, and it was daunting. So yeah, there is so much damage that's been done, and um, I think it's good that we're talking about it, because it's not something we've talked about in detail on the podcast in terms of like um, graded exercise and CBT, but I think it's important that people are aware of the history behind it as well.
Well, do you know what? I used to steer away from it, and also I would steer away from talking about anything to do with the stigma around the illness and the psychology,
Mm,
because I didn't want to fuel that narrative. I
mm,
actually just wanted to talk facts, science. However, it would be an injustice to not just myself, because it happened to me, but to millions of others if
mm,
with my platform and my voice I didn't address it, because
yeah.
people need to be held accountable. They probably won't be,
Mm,
but I need to strengthen that narrative. I can't
mm,
just avoid it. My reason for, I suppose, initially in my mind wanting to not talk about it was because I just thought, well, I don't. We've got past that now, and now the NICE guidelines have changed, and now it's not. We know it's a real illness now, so don't talk about it. But it needs to be spoken about, doesn't it?
mm, definitely.
Because also it's not completely eradicated.
No, and there's still people perpetuating. There's still significant, influential people out there, not naming names, but sort of who are perpetuating this narrative still. That that, oh, the NICE guidelines are wrong, or
Oh, I
this shouldn't
know.
have
The
been.
argument continues. It's
Yeah,
just
and it's
ridiculous.
just go away, please.
100%. So the only thing I would say on that, this might sound contradictory. There might be, so you've got MECFS, that's an umbrella term, right? This is just my
Hmm.
science brain working. I like things to be fair and logical. Because we don't have, well, I say we don't have, but on paper, we don't have a test that you go and take a blood test and say, you've got ME. Yeah. It's just from your symptoms. It's quite clear whether you do or don't, I think, with post-exertional malaise being the
Hmm.
key thing. But arguably, it's this umbrella term. And there probably are people, or there definitely are people, highly likely, within the MECFS umbrella who maybe don't have ME,
Yeah.
and possibly have something else, or because it's a spectrum illness, they're at a different end of the spectrum, and or they get lucky and they do get better. And it seems for a small percentage that this graded exercise and CBT possibly helps them, right? So you can't negate that. If there are a few people that it did help, I don't know numbers, fine. But you cannot, and I really put that in like capitals, ignore the majority of
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
that it either made significantly worse or just didn't help. You can't just
Mm,
ignore that. It doesn't make it, it's illogical. It's actually
mm,
illogical. And now,
mm.
if you look at the science that we've got to date, which again is why I say scrap this mysterious word, it doesn't make sense. If you have a patient who's unwell come to you, like, I mean, what was the psychiatrist going to do? Talk my viral load out of my blood?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, a virus's main prerogative is to hijack your mitochondria. When you get a virus, yeah, they're very clever.
Yeah.
Hence why the world went into a crazy 2020 pandemic because of a virus, they're smart. And its main prerogative is to hijack your mitochondria at the center of your cell, making your energy and, God knows what else. If that's hijacked or interfered with or changed, obviously it's going to have an effect. And then, you might say, oh, well, why do some people get better and some people don't? Well, there's thousands of reasons. Why do some people get this illness and other people don't? Why do some people get better from this and other people don't? Genetics, environmental, hormonal. There's lots of different reasons, and I just think we need to talk fact and stop going into this realm of, I don't even know what to call it. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
So can we stop doing that, please, and just speak facts to me, or don't speak to me?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm very passionate about this. I love how at the beginning of the interview my hair was combed, and now I'm like,
You just go more. Sort of.
I'm really pleased with how long I've been sat up for. To be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I'm just aware of time because we've been talking quite a while, and I've not actually asked many questions.
We didn't get through the questions.
It's fine.
We should do a second half of the interview at a later date.
Yeah, I think it's really important to address these things, and I also think there's a real sense that we, as an ME community as well, that we can feel really sort of like we almost like want to shy away from talking about some of this stuff because it's so distressing, and I think so many of us have been, and I don't think it's too strong a word to say abused either, by the system. And I think so often, like we can it's almost like, oh, you hear this stuff, and like I'm on Twitter quite a bit, and reading, certain people have said certain things again about the psychologization of it, and it's painful, and it goes right back to the heart of like not being believed or not being and there comes an element of and I think we've talked on the podcast before about like shame about the condition, and because of society's sort of perceptions of it, and that you can feel responsible for your own condition or feel responsible for being ill. And I think one of the things we wanted to do on the podcast is like, and it's come through quite a bit. We've done this like mini grief series where I've talked to quite a few people about the impact of grief on chronic illness, or the impact of chronic illness on grief. And I think it's come through time and time again that, what's been encouraging is people reminding, listeners or people watching that it's not your fault. And I think that's a huge thing, an important sort of part of trying to reassure people that, with ME, that this is not your fault, and that we're living through it, and, trying to make a way through this kind of disaster that happens to us in a way. Like in terms of like for you, talking about grief and things, are there significant things have impacted you in that sense of just not being able to do certain things, and how do you kind of manage that for yourself?
I try not to get emotional because I want to be able to talk clearly and coherently. But grief is a big part of this illness, and you do grieve your old self. And I have to sort of remind myself that I'm still Jennie. But, it's taken a lot from me. I used to love running and swimming and socializing and living. And a lot of that has been taken from me because I have to spend a certain amount of hours laid down or a certain amount of hours in bed. And it's frustrating. But I suppose my way of dealing with it was to become engrossed by the science of the illness to date, to understand it better, read books. It was a bit of an escapism. And in those moments where I just couldn't do anything, focus on what I could do, even if it was making a tea or getting out of bed and going to the toilet. I know that that sounds really, really strange,
Mm-hmm.
but focusing on what I can do. And I think I'd allow myself to grieve, but I didn't want to get too trapped in that because to me, again, I tried to be logical. It wasn't helping. It wasn't helping me in that moment.
Mm.
But yeah, a lot of people, the first thing they sort of say to me is, "Oh, do you miss acting?" Because I can't work at the moment. I could maybe
Mm.
take on a smaller role, but I would need the use of a wheelchair and walking stick
Mm.
just to be up and about. And I'd have to have a limited amount of time I could be used on set. But they say, "Do you miss acting?" And I just think to myself, no, I miss walking down the road to go to the
Yeah.
shop and
Yeah.
buy a pint of milk.
Yeah.
I miss seeing people, being around people. You're sort of, it's almost like you're trapped. And again, this is at this, if you've got a spectrum illness, I'm mild to moderate, and it's just so challenging. And I just
Mm.
always think to myself, I know everything's not comparative. But the way I get through it is I think to myself, okay, you've had a taste of the severe, you're better than that. So just try and be grateful for where you are now. But it's not enough. And the
No.
science needs to be funded. The
Mm.
stigma just needs to be wiped because we've already proven that that's, as we've said, we're allowed to use the word bullshit.
Mm.
We need to fund the science. The government needs to step in. I don't know how to change this. I don't know how to make it better. The narrative is being pushed in the right direction off the back of long COVID, right? It is. There are small changes, but they're not significant enough.
Mm.
And I don't know what to do. That even is harder for me than the grief of myself. I take myself out of it. It makes me more upset to think about the millions of other people that are in
Mm.
my position and worse off. And I don't know if it makes me angry or upset, but I get this like fire inside me because I want to help and I don't know what I
Mm.
can do. I really
Mm.
don't know what I can do. Is this
Mm.
interview going to help? Who knows? I don't know. What can
Mm.
we do?
Mm. Yeah. Apart from baking cakes, maybe.
I know. Well, that's a very light-hearted way to go about it, isn't it? I just thought of something fun. And also, I must say that with Bake for Me CFS, we do offer to find a collaborative baker because I appreciate that a lot of people with MECFS can't bake cakes. Some can,
Mm.
and we do have regular bakers with ME that will join in the process, and that's great. That they actually make amazing cakes. Some of them are just so creative. I love it.
So, do you want
Um,
to tell us about kind of the whole thing, like how it came about and Bake for CFS and
yeah,
where the idea
definitely.
came from? And
But what I was just saying was that we have the
sorry.
collaborative bakers so that if you can't bake, we'll find someone that will bake for you. We find someone online that will
Mm.
bake the cake for you, your design, and then we enter it as your bake. Because I
Brilliant.
wanted people with ME to feel like they were involved.
Yeah.
And Bake for ME CFS is basically just getting people to bake and donate £4 or whatever they can to their chosen charity. We have a long list on the
Mm.
website trying to raise awareness for chronic illness. And I try and pull in any judges that I can, guest judges, celebrity judges, and at the end we just look at all the photos and as appropriately and accordingly as we can, because there's all different levels and ages entering, we choose a star baker. And sometimes there's a prize. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a really fun, light-hearted way, I think, to keep the illness going in people's minds, heard, acknowledged. And I just wanted to do something that was fun and
Mm.
pretty, colourful bakes. So that's
Mm.
what it. And then the other thing I did, this was more recently. I showed you earlier. It's my
Oh yeah.
mugs. A shut the fuck up cake for have you tried yoga?
I've seen it now. Yeah.
Cheeky, very cheeky. And basically, I just thought maybe I could design some fun mugs. I've got another one over here for Bake for Me CFS, and they say "Made in bed."
Mm-hmm.
Look, you see it's dripping with water because I've knocked it over.
Oh dear.
And this is a shut the fuck up cake for we all get tired sometimes.
That's brilliant. Yeah,
You know, it's just a little, it's just playful. And I
yeah,
appreciate that many people who say, oh, well, we all get tired sometimes. You know, of course they get tired. I've been a healthy person up
yeah.
until the age of 30. You got tired sometimes. It's very different.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just a playful, creative thing. I think I did it more. I think I designed the mugs as much for my mental health as to raise awareness, just to actually do something.
And people can buy them, can they?
Yes, they
That's
can. We've
brilliant.
got a shop. We've got an Etsy shop.
That's brilliant. And what we'll do is I'll put the link in for people to go and look at look at the website for Bake
Yeah,
Family
the website
CFS,
sends you to the shop as well.
and they can look at the shop. And yeah, it was lovely because we sort of like promoted it a little bit last month or the month before when I spoke to Christina Baltais, and it was lovely because she sort of talked a little bit about, she's been judging
Yes,
with the cakes as well, so it was so good to see her work and things like that as well. So it was brilliant. Yeah.
absolutely. I love Christina. We've got her on the judging panel for the Christmas Bake Off. We have Lorna, who does the cream crackered blog. I don't know if you ever come
Oh
across her.
yes.
She might be
Yeah.
a good one to interview, actually,
Yeah.
if she's up for it. And Anna from Tea Party for Me.
Yeah. Yeah. She's brilliant. Yeah.
So that we've got. She's actually just emailed me, so I need to reply and put her on the panel. That's a new thing, exclusive news for Bake Four. But yeah, it really keeps my spirits up for sure, and I get a lot of positive feedback from it. So that's something that, I know it's not going to be anything life changing, but it's something that, just brings a smile to people's faces, I suppose.
It's good. No, it's important, and I think yeah, and it taps into that creativity. Do you bake yourself?
So, embarrassingly not. I think I've got a problem with following instructions and rules. I
Right.
like to make things up, have that's the creative side of me. My partner bakes, he's good at baking. Not regularly, he wants to get into it more. But no, I don't bake. I've tried baking; it didn't really work out. I didn't bake before I got sick, and then obviously when I got sick, and I'm got limited energy, I'm not going to go and try and bake cakes. I'd probably get a collaborative baker, someone to bake my idea. I'd be better off doing that. I do cook. I love cooking. And I've adjusted my cooking so that I could actually lie on the kitchen floor whilst cooking. I know that that sounds insane, but I've got some
Wow.
really good tips. I think I should do a cooking channel. Um, but no, I don't bake, which is awful. I'm an avid reader and an avid eater.
Hmm. That's good.
Do
That's
you
good.
bake? Because I'll have you bake a cake if you do.
No, because I thought about it. I thought I could try and bake a cake and then sort of present it as part of it. But no, my wife is amazing. She goes through phases of like kind of baking constantly and then not baking for a while, and yeah, so it just depends how busy the sort of family and household is.
All
But
right. Well,
yeah,
if your wife bakes anything Christmas themed, get
yeah,
it in the Bake For competition.
will do. I'll see if she's got a bit of time. But yeah, it's been really good to talk. I'm aware of kind of like yeah, I'm just aware of like people listening, and we've talked for quite a while. So but thank you for coming on. Is there anything else that you want to share before we finished? Any sort of like I don't know, any funny stories about acting or anything like that? Or
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've got loads of funny stories I could tell. Um, there, there's a scene, an acting scene that I'm. Let's go with Vikings. That's probably
hmm,
most well known. One of the scenes that I'm actually probably most proud of because it was the most challenging scene for me was when I got my ear cut off. Do you remember that
hmm.
horrific
I
scene?
was
It
gonna
should come
ask
with
about
a.
that. There was two scenes that I kind of remember really vividly from Vikings, and thinking back because like when you watch a TV series, you don't sort of like remember the whole plot or the storyline, but you kind of tend to remember certain scenes, and that was one of them. And then the poisoning one as well. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, the ear one, that's got a funny story behind it. Um, it's a horrific scene. It should come with a warning, really, shouldn't it?
Mm,
It's quite gory. Well, when I first got the script through, spoiler alert, Judith wasn't going to have her ear chopped off. So she says the name before the ear gets chopped off. I thought, boring. You tie me to a post and threaten to chop my ear off. Get it off. And the sin of adultery, because obviously she with the monk, um, the sin of that meant the punishment would be in those days that you had your ears both and nose chopped off. So I
Mm.
wrote to Michael Hurst and was like, look, I think we should just chop it all off. My agent had a heart attack. He said, you didn't say that, did you? I said, yeah. You know, because obviously for my acting career, so for the first season I was in, he was thinking, what are you going to do for the rest? Just act with
Yeah.
your eyes. And I was like, yeah, you know, make it real. And so thankfully I was saved by Michael and one of the other cast members actually, who had suggested, you know, why aren't we chopping Judith's ear off, just her ear? So there was a rewrite, and Michael was always open to suggestions and rewrites and stuff when the scripts would come in, where she's getting her ear chopped off, and I thought, great. But then I panicked because I had to Google how do you feel getting your ear chopped off and what can I
Mm.
use past trauma. I was hit by a taxi when I was 17. I've actually got a scar.
Oh
You
wow.
wouldn't be able to see it on here, but it
Yeah.
goes up on my ear. The other ear, that was the ear that was chopped. So I thought, well, I've had ear damage when I was hit by the taxi, ear and head damage. So I
Yeah.
sort of know what it feels like to have a throbbing ear, but not chopped off. It was hanging a little bit though. And yeah, when it came to do the scene, because there's such a fantastic art department, you know, and
Yeah.
the crowd, they were all throwing cabbages at me. That actually hurt. And I was tied to this post, and there was a fire, and I had this billowing white nighty gown on that I actually was scared was going to go up in flames, genuinely. So the fear was real.
Wow.
I'm proud with how real we as a
Yeah.
collaborative managed to make it look, because we really did. I think, you know, I think that's why I'm proud of it. It looks real. But the funny story is, we'd done a few takes, and the director came up to me, Helen Schaefer. She said, "What are you wearing under the nightie?" I was like, my knickers. She said, the title for this should be Jennie Jacques talks about her knickers. I was, we can see through the nightie, and I was young at the time. I was like, I don't know,
Oh.
so was it like nearly 10 years ago? I can't remember now. Anyway, I had
Mm.
zebra print knickers on, and you could see them. Now,
Uh.
obviously, Queen Judith's not going to be wearing zebra print knickers, is she? So you have to take them off. And I was like, well, what am I going to put on? And costume appeared like magic
Wow.
with some beige knickers. So I threw those on. And then we realized that I had lime green toes. So I was just like, as prepared as I'd been, and I am meticulously prepared when it comes to my acting scenes, you know, that's just the way I approach things. Although it was a bit Stanislavski, like method style, the fact that I was actually having cabbages thrown at me
Yeah.
walking up the thing. But yeah, I'd obviously neglected my underwear and toes, something that all actresses need to
Wow.
remember. But I thought that was quite a funny
Yeah.
filming story.
Because I always wonder, one of the things, because for the whole of the rest of the time you're in it, you had to have your hair on one side. And I always wondered whether there was ever like a mistake that the hair went on the other side, or it was
No,
always.
no, the hair department, I had a wonderful hairstylist, mostly Jenny. She was Jenny with an IE as well. And she was as meticulous as I was at planning the scene, she was with the hair.
Mm.
And we would not, under any circumstances, and I can say this categorically, so you can go back and watch every episode, forgotten to hide my ear. And I
Yeah.
do actually get fans come up to me over the years who they go, did you play Queen Judith? I goes, oh yeah. And they say, can we see your ear?
Just to make sure.
It didn't really get chopped off.
That's random.
And one of the cast members actually came in with like a jelly toy ear with fake blood on it and launched it at me while I was getting my makeup done. So it was like an ongoing joke about my ear. And it is funny because it does tie in with the fact I was hit by a taxi when I was 17. And I did get a nickname of Van Gogh at one point. So it was just ironic that I'm then
That's
playing a
funny.
character that gets their ear chopped off.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, and yeah,
That's all
thanks for
right.
joining us. It's been. I hope people kind of get a lot out of listening, and thank you for so voraciously kind of like discussing the issues that we've discussed today. I think it's been really important, and I hope this kind of like episode kind of gets to as many people as possible, because I think as people in the ME community, we need voices like yours to reassure and to push forward this narrative as well. So it's been really good to hear your thoughts, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. And I'm just so happy that I'm well enough to do the interview. I remember there being a time when I couldn't have done this, you know. So maybe that can be a little bit of hope for some people. I
Mm.
do appreciate that for others it's consistent and, they have to find hope in other areas. But as someone 5 years into it, I still have ups and downs. Yes, I use a wheelchair for longer journeys and I use a stick, but I'm doing better than I was.
Mm. That's
And
brilliant.
that means that potentially someone else out there that might be feeling really, really bad in those moments when the body is just shutting down, maybe there's some hope. And if you go on to jenniejacques.com, I have very cautiously shared some of the interventions that have helped me in case they might help others. They're not cures.
Mm.
Everybody's different. Things that have helped me might not be even accessible to someone else and might not help them. Some things help one person and make another person worse. So
Mm.
I'm by no means advertising, do this, do that. But just in case, I think that's all we can do, isn't it? Cautiously
Mm.
share what may or may not have worked for us along the
Mm.
way,
Mm.
along this long road to potential recovery. Who knows?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank
It's been
you.
good.
I've had a great time. I want to come back.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.